had some fun earlier today, 2 p.m. to be exact, listening to 105 through the Fan as Mike Zimmer was introduced as the defensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys. And I don't say that sarcastically. I know it sounded like, oh, he just said that for the segue. I was actually genuinely interested in listening to what Mike Zimmer had to say about what his approach would be to being the defensive coordinator and the ways to make this team better, this Cowboys team better. And one of the things that he said got me really interested. And he was asked about the prospect of working with DaRon Bland and working with Trayvon Diggs, clearly two very good cornerbacks. And within the course of this, he said some very interesting stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm always excited to coach with good players and good defensive backs. You know, it's kind of was my, as you said, my baby coming up. You know, I love the technical aspect of that position. I know you guys that were here 18 years ago. When I was, you probably saw some of that stuff when I was here. But you know, footwork, technique, hand placement, you know, getting out of the break, shoulder level, you know, all those things. And so, you know, those two guys. Obviously, I've never worked with them, so I don't know. I've only seen them on tape. But you know, hopefully, we can continue to get them better. I know, you know, obviously, I've watched some of those guys on tape.
So there you go. There was that. There was other instances where he mentioned the idea of making sure that you coach guys up. And so that got me thinking, right? The idea is, especially when you compare him to Dan Quinn, who Dan Quinn seemed to be very much about making sure that, you know, like let's get turnovers and those things. But it seems, and I know that Al Harris has talked about how, you know, the idea of like technique and those types of things and so on and so forth. But ultimately, he was heavy on talking about the technique and making sure the guys are doing things the right way, and that ultimately leading to the turnovers. Mike Zimmer was. And that made me think, who do you think on this defense is going to benefit the most?
Yeah,
from having Mike Zimmer as a defense coordinator with that level of approach and his kind of attention to detail and technique and those types of things.
The first guy I thought of, and it might be low-hanging fruit, but it's DaRon Bland. I mean, it's a guy.
Interesting. Okay.
It's a guy that was a late-round pick that most Cowboys fans and most people around the league didn't know much about. And 2 years ago, I'm not talking about the season just happened, but the year before that, he showed a lot of good stuff out of the slot and had some interceptions, but wasn't really the highlight of the team because people were still looking at Diggs and Micah and LVE and all those guys. And he kind of went as an unsung hero. And then obviously this year, Diggs steps out with the injury and Bland has to play a lot more, leads the league in picks, pick sixes, the whole nine we already know. But I think it's safe to say that there were some technical aspects of his game that could get better. And with his technique and especially his man coverage and shadowing receivers, especially on some of those in-breaking routes as you saw. He had really good success kind of on those mesh concepts and against guys kind of running away from the quarterback. A lot of those picks happened on out routes and drags when they got past the quarterback's second window and they were kind of in that third window towards the outside the numbers. Wasn't as many towards the middle of the field and kind of those in-breaking routes. So I'm really hoping that Zimmer with his DB background can help coach up DaRon Bland and get even better in that aspect and kind of make him an all-around technical corner, which I thought he was quite good last year. I thought he was kind of a tier 1 corner, but a lot of people gave him slack, or didn't give him slack, I should say, for kind of his lack in certain games against bigger receivers. And a good coach is going to teach you technique to go against those bigger guys and not be at a disadvantage, where I think DaRon Bland sometimes was caught. And obviously having Trayvon Diggs back next year, and we'll see if they have Gilmore back, and all that stuff will help Bland. Maybe they'll put him in the slot, and we'll kind of see how the positions and personnel shakes out throughout the offseason. But I'm really excited for what he can do with DaRon Bland and blossom into this third year and see how much better he can get, because I think the potential's there, and we haven't even touched on the all-pro and Trayvon Diggs.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you went there, because I feel like a lot of people appreciate how good those guys are, and I think you're right. DaRon Bland does probably have room to grow, as I'm sure but Trayvon Diggs does as well, and I think Zimmer will help that. I was thinking somebody else in the defensive secondary, and tell me if you agree here. The one that immediately came to mind, he wears number 6. His name is Donovan Wilson.
Yep.
Donovan Wilson is a guy who has never been wanting for, aggression and physicality. Those are things that he brings and he has in, just in high amounts. He likes throwing himself into, run stopping and into tackles. But one thing about it is when it came to actual coverage in the secondary, he didn't feel strong at those types of things.
No.
And so the idea of having a coach who, began in the secondary like Mike Zimmer and has that level of attention to detail and also like will hold you accountable, I feel like Donovan Wilson could stand to gain a huge amount from, working under Mike Zimmer. Because if you add to that physicality that he has coming downhill and being maybe more of a box linebacker, allow him to be more better in coverage, that's a well-rounded player that I like a lot. Because it's not like he doesn't have necessarily the tools to do it. It just doesn't seem like it's well polished and put together.
And we saw I keep wanting to say last year, but now a whole season's done. 2 years ago, he was a good safety. He got paid for a reason, as well as the whole safety room. And this year we saw him kind of being out of position, having to play a lot in the box, kind of not in a natural spot, and didn't have his best year. I think he would say the same as well. And I agree with you. Hopefully Zimmer can kind of hone in on the weaknesses that he had and kind of coach those up, because I think he does have the tools available. Another guy that comes to mind and might be low-hanging fruit as well is Micah Parsons, but not in the fact of just, well, Micah Parsons and him and pass rushing and all, they're just going to kill it. Like, kind of using him kind of, I don't want to say all over the field, but in different spots, because he had a player similar in Anthony Barr that was used as the pass rusher. Outside
linebacker, yeah.
Yeah, and it's someone that we kind of saw towards the later half of the season that Micah wasn't primarily just a left defensive end and rushing the pass. We saw him over the center kind of a couple yards back. We even saw, I think it was, what game was it? The Miami or Buffalo game where he was kind of in between the D-line and the linebacker. Where he was kind of in that little 2.5 yard split.
Right.
And I think Zimmer is going to get creative with him. I don't think he's just going to line up him at left defensive end and just say rush the passer every single play. And we might see some plays where he's using him more in a special way. So I'm really excited for some new eyes, because we've only seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, Micah Parsons with Dan Quinn, correct?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, so this will be some fresh eyes on Micah Parsons, and kind of we might see a whole new beast come out. And if I trust anybody for what he's done with that Vikings kind of secondary unit and linebacking core, it would be Mike Zimmer. So I'm really excited for Bland. I'm really excited for Micah Parsons, using him all over the field. And I think you made a great point on Donovan Wilson. What's another guy that you think maybe didn't have his best year that you think can kind of be revived with a Mike Zimmer scheme?
Well, one of the things that I was thinking of as, okay, maybe players that could benefit, accountability seems to be one of the big things that people look at Mike Zimmer for. And I think a player that could maybe benefit from a level of accountability, maybe Sam Williams.
Yeah.
Right. Sam Williams has been.
Say that one. I co-sign.
There's a lot of talent there, but it seems like just the being pinpoint with what you're doing. We saw some penalties from Sam Williams and being very aggressive and trying to get to his spots, and that was good. Some of that even on special teams. If Sam Williams can like hone that in and be disciplined, there's plenty of talent there to be an incredible pass rusher. And so I'm interested to see what he looks like when you have Mike Zimmer adding to that discipline aspect of it, and focusing on technique. I think that he could end up really developing and getting better.
He might even be a thing, because Dorrance Armstrong, being a free agent, correct, might be somewhere where you can. I don't want to let him go, second on the team in sacks, but if he were to be let go, and if Reggie's point becomes true, and this guy is a really disciplined guy that you can play more often in replace of him, then maybe that is something that you're not like, oh my gosh, we lost DaRon Armstrong, because now Sam Williams, the talent's there. Mm-hmm. We've seen he can rush the passer. He's aggressive. He's strong. He's physical. He's quick. I mean, he got to the punter every play. Every time they were playing the ball, he was in the backfield. So hopefully he can just hone in on that technique stuff and discipline and not jumping off sides and lining up off sides. Because this D line, man, how many times have we been like, that guy's got talent? Oh, Fowler and Armstrong and Osa, and like these guys can get after it, but it's like pre-snap penalties and hitting the quarterback and not being gap assignments.
Yeah, it's very clear that the priority was get to the quarterback, right? Yeah. And so that was the priority. Everything else kind of took a little bit of a back seat to that. And so I think that you were willing to kind of take that as the eggs that were broken in order to make the omelet. And it seems like the priority with Zimmer is like, no, technique has to be down point and polished, and all the other things.
That's one of the things that gets him grouchy.
And so, and he could be a grouch.
Yeah.
Even as much as he wants to say that he's, well-adjusted and all those types of things. The grouch is what people are looking for in this instance. So how about this from the 817, Mozzie Smith? I thought about Mozzie and I was like, how much of that is going to be like the unique flavor of Mike Zimmer? How much of that is going to be like, hey, he just needs to, develop? But hey,
I'm all for it.
I'm with it, right? And I do think that, yeah, that's a fair thing here because technique seems to be a big thing for him in general.
Slow off the ball.
Being slow off the ball is tough, right? If you can get that down, that's half the battle. If we can get you to have your hands in the right place, be able to shed blocks in the way that you need to, be able to hold up guys and not be moved. Now, I wonder how much of that is like having the right weight on him, because it did seem like he lost weight during the course of the season, which was 30. Completely inexplicable to me that you have this guy that you have like as a big butt, a nose tackle, one technique, and you're moving out to kind of play more like a 3 technique. It didn't
I couldn't explain it.
Didn't make very much sense to me, but just the idea that, hey, man, be big, hold that spot, but then on top of that, have the technique to get off the block quickly and, put your hands in the right place and do those types of things. If Mike Zimmer can get to those things and help him along, you imagine that you maximize the possibility of Mozzie Smith becoming what you anticipated when you drafted him with a first-round pick.
And I think the 2-4 brings up a good point. Does this mean that the first-round pick will be on the defensive side? And without getting too much into the draft, one, we don't know. But two, Zimmer kind of talked about in his presser about having his hand on talent, that the Jones brothers have been willing to let you kind of have some say-so on who you pick and the personnel and stuff. But he also was like, you don't always get who you want. And the offense has to draft guys. I know offensive line is going to be is obviously going to be a point of emphasis, but I'm sure if Zimmer makes a large push for some guy he wants, I'm sure the Joneses and Mike will take that into consideration. And obviously what they do in free agency and trades and restructuring and bringing guys back will play a factor in that. But I'll say on the defensive side of the ball, I feel a lot more comfortable. And I think some of the guys that we saw discipline issues with, the Sam Williamses of the world, will have someone who's a little bit more structured and hold them accountable. And maybe we can just see their talent show through and not kind of the pre-snap boneheaded penalties that we came to know with the Dallas Cowboys.
Yep.